Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome aboard. Thanks for joining us today. We're delighted to have you all here. Thanks for joining. This is the Transform Startup and Scale Up session. My name is Roisin Lyons and I'm your MC for today. I'm delighted to have a lovely panel today of Daniel Kyne, Ciara Sheahan and Wendy Slattery. Now, as you may know, the Transform series is a new free online webinar series that explores the growing impact of digital transformation on business and society. We'll be covering a total of 6 areas ranging from the future of work to smart cities and communities, the circular economy, and much more. Today, however, we are looking at the second of these areas by focusing on the startup and scale-up industry. We're delighted to be joined today by Daniel Kyne, founder and CEO of Opinion X, Ciara Sheahan, founder of Orb Media, and Wendy Slattery, founder and CEO of Beauty Buddy, who will be discussing the challenges and opportunities of running a startup during times of COVID-19, amongst other things. So if you would like to participate in this great discussion, feel free to send in your questions using the Q&A function. You'll find that at the bottom of your screen. Please be aware that the chat function is disabled, so just use the Q&A tab. Towards the end of the session, I'll tally up some of these questions and put them to our panel. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my speakers and get them to tell us a little bit about their story and what they're currently doing. So I might start off with Wendy, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Right. Hi, Wendy. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, so our company is called Beauty Buddy. It's a data analytics company for the beauty and cosmetic industry. Our data is gathered through an innovative app like TripAdvisor for beauty and cosmetic products. So you can scan the barcode, or you can search a product and you get ratings and reviews on those products from your peers. You can also click through and purchase the products from the app now as well. So we launched the business in November, actually, 2017. So that's when we had the idea and started our journey with all the different programs like New Frontiers and stuff. So today we're a team of 9 and we raised investment last year. And at the minute, we're just working on scaling our users in the UK and Ireland and in New York specifically.
Amazing. Thanks, Wendy. And, you know, I'm always fascinated by how these ideas start and the kind of the problem that you were trying to solve. Mm-hmm. So back, you know, in 2007, what was that driving force that started that idea?
Yeah, I suppose for us, the difference with us is we're not coming from like the likes of Ciara with industry knowledge and you know, I mean, it's not our background. Beauty is not our background. Tech is not our background. But actually the problem was literally trying to make a decision to purchase. There's so many, like the beauty industry is worth nearly 800 billion. I'll give you an idea. And the average woman is spending about 80,000 euro in her lifetime on beauty products. With very little information about any of those. And if you ask anybody, there'll be half-used bottles of everything on their dressing table. So for us, it was literally this solving the problem of honest reviews and honest peer-to-peer feedback from people you know about different products. And we came at it with the problem as the consumer, you know, solving the problem for ourselves. Because when you search a product, it was just e-commerce sites trying to sell you the product, you know. So and obviously brands' websites don't put up any negative reviews, which is not a bad thing either, but you know, so we just built it for ourselves as a consumer.
Amazing. Yeah, there's a real common thread between all 3 of you here today. I was thinking about it earlier. It's, you know, using information to kind of uncover the truth and uncover the story and kind of shape that storytelling. So I think it's really nice how they all blend together. Thanks, Wendy. I'll definitely dig into some more of that in a sec. I'm going to move to Ciara next to tell us a little bit about herself and her company.
So my name is Ciara and my company is called Orb Media, and we build immersive brand engagement experiences for luxury and high-end brands and vendors. So what that means is that at the front end, you as the consumer see a beautiful experience based in 360 and VR, and it's interactive and it's immersive. So we take you into the story of the brand and we keep you engaged for 10, 12, 15 minutes, and we keep your bounce rate really low because we populate the experience with really interesting messaging, 3D animations, immersive objects, and the option to purchase, follow a blogger, watch a video, that type of thing. So as the consumer sees this wonderful gamified, really sexy cinematic experience at the front, but at the back end, we track the data of your consumer behavior journey, but it's data that's gained through immersive interpretation. So it means that while you might scroll on your phone and you might click on Instagram, so you like those jeans, you don't like that scarf, we can actually get better data because your actions are being driven by your emotions, and your emotions are being created by your experience with the brand. So it's front end and back end.
So interesting. And when did you launch this company?
We had an interest in the whole 360 VR area since 2016. And it was November 2016 when I went to about 5 or 6 media launches in that autumn. And I sat there with my business partner, Ian, and I was like, please don't say VR, please don't say 360, please don't. And nobody did. So we went to the last one and it was Maximum Media. And we went to it in the Westin and we came out and I was like, right, we're doing this, because they hadn't mentioned it. And I really felt that they were missing a trick, the whole engagement thing. People swipe on, like your average swipe scroll is 2 seconds. Wow. 2 seconds before you go on the next one. So I knew that we had something at that moment, but then we had like a 2-year period of discovery, and we teamed up with Samsung because we knew them from a previous professional life. And they'd launched the Samsung Gear product, the camera, but they had no content. So we kind of liaised with them and built a partnership to go through a process of discovery of what works and what doesn't work. And then we went on an accelerator called the Female High Flyers, which was transformative. I would urge any female out there to do it. But there was one particular seminar we had, and it was on finance. And I came out and I said to Ian, we need to press pause right now and reform the company. So that was in 2017. So by July 2018, we had reformed on the CRO. We'd stopped everything we were doing and we had rebranded as Orb Media.
Wow. That's so interesting. You know what? Timing is such an important feature of startups, and you were so ahead of the curve when it came to that. I mean, we're kind of used to a little bit now of hearing that word immersive in the kind of the marketing and the business context, but in 2016 that was just not a big player. So wow, that was amazing that you copped on to that trend and you've been following it since. Very interesting. Look forward to asking you more about that. Now, Daniel, I know quite well because Daniel is a graduate of the DCU Business School, which I work in. So I've heard this story a couple of times, but it's always really interesting, and I love hearing about the success of our graduates. Daniel, tell us a little bit about you and about OpinionX.
Yes, so as Roshan said, my name is Daniel Kyne. I'm the co-founder and CEO of OpinionX. OpinionX is the user research platform that takes all the hassle out of the product discovery process, which in essence really means finding the pain points and the unmet needs and the priorities of a big group of people so that you can inform the decisions that you're going to make about what product or service that you're going to build. So what we've tried to take is a new approach towards user research tools that puts users really at the heart of it. When we kind of dived in and started talking to a lot of people like product managers, we really found that this process of identifying pain points and unmet needs is just crazy and convoluted. You're doing you start with user interviews, you kind of build up some insights and you put it into a giant long survey, you take the insights from the survey and you jump into focus groups, and it's like piecemeal and it's all split up. And we just felt like there's an opportunity here to create a research tool that really puts users at the heart of it, like I mentioned, and identifies the biggest priorities without all these manual processes going on in the background. Like you mentioned, I've had kind of a similar experience to Wendy and Ciara to some extent. Basically the first big milestone that we hit was joining the New Frontiers program out in TU Dublin Blanchardstown, which was about this time last year. It was the start of November. Myself and my co-founder Dara, we were both final year students in DCU at the time. and everything's just kind of moved on from there. That was really the kickstart for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's so interesting that all three groups are really about kind of understanding consumers and understanding people through kind of use of data and interaction with data. And again, what was, your main kind of problem point? It was the complexity of your survey creation. Was there a specific moment where it really became a frustration for you, Daniel?
Yeah, for me, it was a thing I was conscious of for a very long time. Back when I was in secondary school, I was a founding member of the Digital Youth Council of Ireland. And whether it was that experience or working on product innovation at Unilever and things like that, where we were really focused on understanding the opinions of large groups of people, I definitely knew there was a problem here. For me, it wasn't solution focused from the start. I didn't really know what it was going to look like. That kind of inspiration for the solution actually came from DCU as well. Right as I started final year around this time last year, DCU had just run a new student referendum about introducing a smoke-free policy for campus. And we just saw the process there, which is really driven by open-ended surveys. It was like put up a text box, ask people what their opinions are, and then after figure out, okay, how am I going to make sense of all of these hundreds or thousands of opinions? That's really where we were rooted in for the solution. We said, okay, for a lot of people, when you're trying to engage at scale, it really does just look as simple as an open-ended like text box. How can we build on this and add an extra layer of data that surfaces the most important insights to the top, so that someone doesn't have to spend like a whole week reading through an Excel sheet and manually tagging stuff, which is one of the main pain points that we really came across.
Brilliant. And for all three of you, success doesn't happen overnight for sure, and it takes a slog, and it takes understanding, and it takes evolution to really get to where you can be kind of solid in your concept. I know, Daniel, you did an extensive amount of background research on your concept. You interviewed governments and things. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I guess that whole process, which is ironically very linked to what we do anyway at OpinionX, is just called the customer discovery process. So from a very early stage, we kind of took everything that we thought was going to be like a major foundational block of OpinionX, and we just stuck it on the wall as an assumption. And we just went out there, tried to get as many interviews and conversations set up to test out, were all of those things true? Could we move them from assumptions to confirmed insights as well? So like you mentioned, we started off with the public sector. We talked to people from national and local level of government in Ireland, in the UK, in Netherlands and France and a few other countries, to really understand that. And we just basically took that same process and went customer segment by customer segment that we thought could be our initial persona or segment that we would work with. And we just tried to see where is the strongest use case. And to be clear, that's definitely not like the first step that you do in a company. It's something you do across, like you're always doing it. Over the last 3 months, we've had about 60 hours of customer discovery calls. I have 2 more today after this. So it's just constantly getting in front of people who we think are the experts in the space and are experiencing the problem, and trying our best to like put ourselves in their shoes and really understand how they're experiencing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wendy, I mean, I'm sure you had to do an extensive amount of, research to understand your customer and their pain points. And it's probably something that continues because it's such a driving force in your business. What does that look like when you're trying to study that group?
Yeah, well, for us, I suppose, our customer discovery, we did a lot of focus groups, and we set up an actual closed Facebook group to prove our kind of hypothesis that people would help each other if somebody had a question about a product, that somebody would help them and give them their feedback. So we were trying to prove that people would help people for nothing, like for no incentive whatsoever, just to help somebody that had a problem. We also did a very interesting thing that we actually went to transition years in schools, and we went to the teachers and we asked them would they like to see how a focus group is run. And they were delighted for us to show how a focus group gets run. So we got to actually, run focus groups with all age groups from that age group up to like 60 years of age. So, and it's still to this day, we do not focus groups as such. We do like surveys and calls, phone calls with our customers every week. So it's part of our learning every week. And the more data we add to that pile, the more you can definitely see where where it's going and what they're looking for and what their pain point is. So you have to constantly never stop doing like customer discovery.
Yeah, particularly in transition points such as this year when, people are literally changing their behavior. If you haven't that kind of, driving force in your company to keep collecting information and keep testing your assumptions, it can be kind of dangerous. I suppose, Ciara, in your kind of working business model, because it's kind of gamified, you're constantly monitoring that consumer behavior as part of your business.
Well, yes, and it's important that you understand how it looks from different market sectors. Yeah. So one of the most revealing things that we did was that we did an experiment for a guy who wanted to launch a heritage gin brand. And it was a really well-known venue and he had a great reputation and he was very well respected. And it was a beautiful bottle of gin, but he wanted the Love Island demographic.
Oh, wow.
To buy it. So we created an experience for him. And like Wendy, we got a focus group and we basically put in blue gin, his gin, another heritage gin and a Bombay Sapphire and a pink gin. And we actually sent out the link when Love Island was on. And the dwell times that we got in the experience were really high. And then the next day at about 11 o'clock, we must have had about 4 or 5 different WhatsApp messages from people who'd gone back in and who wanted a gin and tonic at 11 o'clock the next day. I kept them all because you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But what it managed to prove was that he was actually at the point where he was about to buy a particular bottle and he was copying another bottle that was out there. And we had to make it really clear to him that, he wasn't Diageo. He was going to need millions to get this over the line. And it didn't matter if he gave away a free tonic. His demographic still wanted pink gin or Graham Norton's pink gin. They didn't want his gin. So we do experiments like that with customers, like in the background a lot of the time, because it helps us understand the subconscious behavior of the user. And as with every customer, they have to know what their expectation is so that you can fulfill that.
So interesting.
All the time.
Yeah, it's so interesting, that kind of understanding that not just, decision making, but that kind of choice architecture that you're building into your business is fascinating. Absolutely. So you've been learning about your target user, you've been evolving your business concept, and then 2020 occurs. And, a scary time for a lot of businesses, a lot of pivots, a lot of change. But what have the last couple of months been like for your businesses and for your business models in general? Might jump back again to Ciara there.
So just before the pandemic hit, we had secured a contract with a very high-end brand in horse racing, the biggest, newest venue in Dublin, which holds 5,000 people and has 9 different bars in it and a cinema. We were in front of 2 very strong on and off trade drinks manufacturers, and we had about 15 to 20,000 euros worth of projects that were about to kick off, and a year-long contract as well, because we're going to launch a subscription model. And I would say within a day and a half that just disappeared, or everybody went quiet. There was a anticipation, there was just silence, just fear, there was actually embarrassment as well on behalf of the brands that they couldn't move forward. So we had to go, right, we had to understand the fact that this was emotional, and we needed to acknowledge the emotions and then look at how we could feed into those emotions, which sounds really bad, but that's what we had to do. So we kind of understood very quickly that there was going to be a problem here for the rest of the year with retail, because I had studied the market in China in the luxury end. And when the pandemic hit, Unilever actually put it in their annual report that the pandemic had just started to hit in China, and they were concerned about it from there on. So when I saw that, I knew we had a problem, but I also knew we had a solution. So then what happened was, during the first couple of months, a lot of the gatekeepers weren't around. So I basically went on every webinar. I got on to the advertising industry, the agencies, the brands, and anything that anyone that I was interested in was involved in, I got on it. and I asked a question, or I got their attention to push forward. And I think during that time was when we actually got lucky with some of the relationships that we managed to establish at that time.
Brilliant. Wow. I mean, again, you know, part of being an entrepreneur is that kind of resourcefulness. And it sounds like you have it in spades, Ciara, that you were able to kind of find people where they were, even when things were a little bit up in the air. Congratulations.
Everybody was so unsure of themselves, and they were people were looking to communicate almost as a way to process the situation.
Yeah.
So you just have to go, right, I'm going to put myself out here and I'm going to go for this. And what's the worst that can happen?
And I can imagine there's so much more energy and interest in the kind of immersive space and VR and AR in education. And, you know, when people are in that remote work context, have you seen a surge of kind of interest in this field?
I have seen a surge of interest. And one thing I will say is that when you get to that point, you have to realize where are you as an expert in your field? So yes, there's lots of educational VR experiences and that whole area moving forward, but that wasn't where we had any value to add. You know, there's some really good guys in this circle who I know who are really good in education, but we had to go, right, it's not our strong point, but let's look at the other market sectors that are struggling and where we can add value to them and bring them a solution that previously they would have pushed down the line. The long finger's gone. There's no long fingers, they're disappeared. That's one good thing about the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. But definitely, I mean, the fact that you were a first mover in that field is great, and it's great to see it moving forward. Wendy, how are the last couple of months for you?
Yeah, they've been interesting is a word I would use often. But I suppose for us, what happened with the pandemic was the brands and the retailer, the brands especially, they start all making hand sanitizer. I think every brand in the world made hand sanitizer very quickly. So, and they start letting off staff very quickly as well, in because most of the brands' head offices are in London and New York, really, for beauty and stuff like that. So they start letting people go. So it was trying to get new connections. But actually what we did, because we had been charging the brands to come onto the app to onboard their products properly, we actually opened that up for free. So we went in as, listen, we'll help you out. We'll give you another, you know, potential revenue avenue for them. We won't charge you, and we'll promote you through our social media, and we'll help you get back on your feet, and we're going to do whatever we can to support you. And at the same time, then we concentrated more of our efforts on the user, because the user was at home, right? And they were in lockdown. So, you know, so we start, you know, working on the UX and our CX of our app, and then start pushing out to the users. So, but now that has all changed. The beauty industry has bounced back nearly online and offline still. So, but the one thing that we brought out during this is the product sampling, actually, which is really exciting. So because there's no sampling in stores anymore, brands, so what we're doing is the brands now give us product samples. Some signs are full size. We send them out to our users that use the app. They review the products and they leave a review on the app. But what they also do is we also arrange now a Zoom call. So you could have 250 samplers on a call with a brand, learning about the brand from the brand remotely now, and they've no retail open. So that's really exciting. That's really taken off, and we've product going out every week to samplers now, and it's just getting busier and busier with users because everybody wants to be getting free product and different things. So, you know, that's a revenue stream that we didn't even have or think about before COVID. So it's a nice to have at the end of it.
And that's really interesting pivot, and probably, you know, obviously maybe wouldn't have occurred, but definitely the kind of ability for people to use Zoom, it wouldn't have even been an option for these types of things. No. We wouldn't have been trained to recognize it. So what an interesting pivot that's made, which probably might go on even after kind of
oh yeah, no, I think it'll definitely go on, because it's like having a focus group with 250 people in it, like, you know what I mean, that all have the product in their hand and are willing to learn. So yeah, it's exciting for us. We just have to keep making sure we have enough product to keep sending out.
Brilliant. But like that, I mean, it's, you know, from a kind of a transaction time space, you know, it's not that much of a burden to jump on a focus group if you don't have to travel to go somewhere. You know, it's, you know, relatively less effort for them. So what a win. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And then Daniel, 2020 was always going to be an interesting year for you anyway, because you were graduating, you were on a program, but how did it all turn out this year for you?
Yeah, I guess we were in quite a lucky position, I'd say, overall. We had only started really working on our first product about 3 months before all the universities and everything started to shut down. It was just myself and my co-founder at the time, so we didn't really have to worry too much about like how we were going to maintain the team. We were only about halfway through our New Frontiers program, so we knew like we were safe for a while at least. That was kind of the position we were in, and we were really grateful that we did have that kind of stability. I guess the pandemic overall did a bit of a funny thing for us in that we had spent the few months before that really setting kind of our views of what the world was going to look like. We really believed in things like the values people held or hold around doing research online were going to change, that people were going to start to see it as just as valid as things like focus groups in person. That was a really core assumption for us. We also believe that the rate of research was really going to increase. People were really adopting things like Slack communities, and exactly like Wendy said, bringing all your users into a community like a Facebook group and interacting with them more. And so we believed as well, one of our like core beliefs around OpinionX was that that level of interaction and research was going to increase. But little did we think it was just going to happen overnight, that everybody would just move to these new values. So in a way, once the pandemic hit, we really like put our boots on and said, we need to get this out to market fast, because this is exactly what we're working on and we want to get it into people's hands. And that was really exactly what we did. So I think 2 weeks after the pandemic hit, we really quickly pulled our first paid pilot together, which in the end, through word of mouth, got us 4 more paid pilots. And we just jumped from 1 to 1 without failing our final year exams was the aim. So that was really the way we experienced the first lockdown. I'd actually say overall, we probably accomplished most of what we've done in the 2 lockdowns that we've had. So whether it was all the focus on paid pilots in the first one, just before the second lockdown is when we made our first 2 hires. Like we've raised our pre-seed funding. We shipped our first kind of public version of the product only about 3 weeks ago. So yeah, overall, I mean, for us, the focus was on how can we make the most of this situation where people's values are shifting to align with ours.
Interesting. Yeah, brilliant. I was just doing the math there when you said 2 weeks after lockdown. I was like, weren't your final exams around that time?
Yeah.
Every teacher there. Brilliant. And I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting because again, you all experienced going through kind of, you know, New Frontiers programs or the the Ryan Academy Female Founders programs. You've all had some experience with kind of an accelerator program. Is that a great way to, you know, help build your ecosystem and kind of gain that sense of network? And has that been a support to you through this? I know at the moment, entrepreneurs might be finding it hard to gain that network and have that support system. So, you know, were those helpful, and are they still helpful now? What do you think, Ciara?
Wendy and I did the Female High Flyers together. And what I will say is that when I applied for the Female High Flyers, I had had a series of rejections from other people I had applied to. And I genuinely think that if I hadn't got on the Female High Flyers, I would have really questioned my position and my value proposition, and I'm not sure I'd be here. Wow. Because the sense of validation that I got from that program, and it met every single one of the needs I had at the time, everything from making me stop and reform my company to, I met people like Wendy, I met people like Sharon from Peachy Lean, like people who are your tribe, you know. So if you can find your tribe, you will get through it. Like I rang Wendy one day and I had a product and I was like, Wendy, what will I do? And she said, put it out there. And I did. And it, like, that really had a massive effect of growth for our business. So you will find your tribe at the right time, and you kind of have to trust in the universe as well. So I do think accelerators are really important, but I would say don't judge your value proposition whether you get them or not. But they are great when you do.
Brilliant. And have you, kept up that network even now through COVID? Do you still feel kind of connected to other entrepreneurs and other support systems like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really good one called Awaken Hub, which is on Twitter, which it's only it's smallish, but it's very effective. So it's actually nearly easier at the moment to find your tribe online because you have more time and more access, and people have more time to give you.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. And Daniel, what about you? I mean, you're just relatively finished, or are you still in the New Frontier, just finishing?
So yeah, we're finished New Frontiers.
Yeah, and did you find that was a good way of getting kind of a network and support, and how have you continued that forward?
Yeah, we've pretty much lived in startup programs for the last year. So we did New Frontiers for 6 months for phase 2. We jumped straight into New Frontiers phase 3. In the middle of that, we did the Ireland Funds Business Plan Competition, which is NDRC's pre-accelerator program. And then we just went from that straight into the NDRC at Arc Labs Accelerator, which we're finishing on Monday. So we're right at the very end of that. We're about to be just like released into the big bad world in a way. But yeah, I think there's a few key points I think Ciara made that are really great. I think on those programs is where you do find your tribe, and it's very different to the sort of network that you build within the ecosystem from all the other events. It's much more of a support group, and it's exactly like you said, Ciara. It's someone to ring that'll pat you on the back when you're doing well, that'll pick you up when you're down. Like, they just completely understand the experience that you're going through, and I think that's really important to have. I definitely think there's a huge benefit to being engaged in the broader ecosystem as well. I generally try like every 2 weeks to jump on a call with a founder who's not in the same position as me. So someone who's further down the line and has more progress, or someone who's really early on, because you learn a lot from someone who has a completely different perspective as well. So I think that's great. I'd say over the last year, I've had mentors spilling out my ears. There's just so much advice and mentorship. The best people I've found along the way, and the ones I really try to keep close from this whole startup ecosystem, are generally the ones that ask you loads of really good questions, rather than the ones who kind of come in and tell you what to do. Generally, the ones that ask you loads of questions are the ones that have the biggest impact on you. They help you find your blind spots. They help you kind of pull great insights out of all these hours of conversations that you're having. So I think there's a lot of different people within the ecosystem. It's worth like having your tribe, and then your advisors, and then people at different stages along the way. And that used to be quite a natural process with all these startup grinds and startup weekends and everything like that going on. But it definitely takes a little bit more, like, you kind of have to proactively go in and work on it now, especially if you're not on one of these startup programs.
Yeah, there isn't so much of that kind of informal networking after an event, or the kind of the touch points that you would have maybe normally had in the natural settings. Yeah,
but there's great. So one great resource that popped up, I think about a month ago. My ability to tell time is really poor over the last few months, but Scale Ireland put together a Slack community for startup founders. That's been a really great resource because it has all those different people I just mentioned in it. And everybody's really open. Everybody knows they're in there to help each other and not sell stuff or promote anything. So yeah, while it definitely has been a bit trickier, there have been these new resources that have come up to try and fill those gaps as well.
Yeah, and Danny, you've been a part of other people's ecosystems as well in terms of the hackathons that you've been involved in. They're quite a good resource for students, because there will be some students on this call.
Yeah, absolutely. Just at the weekend, so just last weekend, I was mentoring at an online hackathon that was being run by a group mainly over in UCD. I think this is something that Roshan, you and I have talked about a little bit as well, in that the student experience this year is just so different. Like there's a lot of easy negatives you can jump to in how you've lost interaction points and everything. I think there's a few ways you can leverage it for advantages as well. The kind of walls and the silos that build up around each university are just non-existent. And then there's loads of great events that you don't have to justify getting up at 6 in the morning and getting a train into the city centre to go to. So yeah, I think there is a lot of opportunity. I really think students should get out there and rather than just listening to us kind of talk on as well, which like there's great stuff to learn from these sessions, but try and find opportunities to kind of get your hands dirty and mix with people and learn from that experience as well.
No, I agree, sure. And Wendy, how have you been building up your kind of ecosystem of support and advice over the last couple of years? And, you know, how do you aim to do it as we go through this year?
Yeah, well, like that, I was on the New Frontiers and then the NDRC program. We did the one in Galway. So we moved to Galway for a few months. That was great. Felt like a student again. But it was our network, like those programs don't work unless you put the work into them. They really don't. If you're like looking at one of these programs to get you your funding, to get you your connections, to get you your product, you're wasting your time. Unless you're planning to go in and do the work, don't go into them at all. You know, if you can leverage from those networks. I actually am networking more than I've ever networked. There's so much you can do. I do there's a free networking thing called Lunch Club, and basically what it was a startup, and obviously COVID really helped it, and now it's a big global network. So you can, every Monday I sign up for 2 calls. You pick what you want. You can pick other startups, you can pick investors, you can pick marketing, brand, and it randomly selects people from all over the world. And you get to meet 2 strangers every week from different startups in Australia, Germany, China, India. I've literally met people from everywhere. I literally sent our pitch deck to Australia yesterday because one of the guys I was talking to is a part of an angel network in Australia. Like, so I'm doing that networking, and then you have the Forbes women, that's a Slack group, there's the 50 women in tech. Like, there's no excuse for not being able to build a network. And I think the important thing is that you keep the network that you have built and make sure you're helping them and checking in every now and again to make sure and see where people are and how they're doing, because the entrepreneurial journey is an absolute roller coaster with highs and lows, you know, and sometimes highs and lows in the same day, you know. So, you know, it isn't like a lovely, exciting journey and people are just throwing money at you to raise money. And, you know, even raising money takes, you know, a massive networking, you know, so you need to start networking now. And LinkedIn as well, asking people for advice that are in your industry. You know, it's one of the best ways that we networked. And also we got 3 investors from that, from asking for advice.
Yeah, so. And it's really important to kind of give back to that network. You know, you can't be obviously always just asking for stuff. And it sounds like you're really contributing to your to making your network really solid. That's brilliant. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's something that when we teach entrepreneurship, we, you know, constantly have to tell students that it's very rewarding, but it's an emotional marathon, you know, in so many ways. And to kind of, you know, show the real picture and you know, hearing from people like you is a really good insight into the life of an entrepreneur. It's not the job of an entrepreneur, it's the life of an entrepreneur, really, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah, no, and if you are thinking about embarking on this life, you know, what recommendations would you give to founders that have a good idea and are thinking of launching but are probably a bit scared of the current kind of conditions that we're in? Do you have any pieces of advice for them, Wendy?
Okay, well, I think my advice wouldn't really change whether we're in a pandemic or not. If you look at the true history, some of the best startups in the world came out of pandemics or downturns, or you know, they really did. My thing is never to have any regrets, right? So if you have an idea and you think you could do something, I think the one thing that you don't want at the end of your life is to go, I wish I had tried, or I wish I had looked into it. But one of the big things I would say is, you know, just start. Stop talking about starting and just start. You know, you don't have to quit your job. You don't have to quit college to just start. There's lots of ways you can, you know, work out your hypothesis to see if what your assumptions are without spending any money. There's huge amount of ways of figuring out whether your idea is good and whether someone will pay for it without you even putting money in anywhere. Do not build anything is another one. Do not build an app. Do not build an app until you have tens of thousands of people lining up to pay for it. There's like, you can build an app with no tech, for $15 a month on a thing called Proto. And I used that, and I got meetings with L'Oreal and Estee Lauder in London and New York. And I had a fake app. It didn't do anything, but it looked like an app and it worked like an app, but there was nothing behind it. But the whole point was to see if they understood it and to see if they got it, do you know, that kind of way. So don't build, don't spend money. You can figure out your idea. Just start.
Yeah, it's really just getting that kind of MVP that, you know, give your audience or give your potential customers the experience of what you're trying to do, and then they'll create that. What about you, Daniel? What advice would you give to any future founders out there?
I think Wendy has started with the biggest points. Thankfully, that was how we did start, only because I'd made the mistake before of jumping in and trying to build something from the get-go that I knew not to do that. And similarly, we started off with, I used Proto.io previously. We used Marvel app this time, and we just used a prototype to get a meeting from Gordon Brown, the former minister or prime minister of the UK. That was like the very first one we got, and it was just off the back of a prototype. So really echoing that, don't build from the get-go. What you really, really need to do is like identify a clear pain point within like a really like clear homogeneous persona group. So like one type of person experiencing one really like big hair on fire problem. That's so much more valuable than having like a clever idea for how you're going to do it. One thing I'd also add to this, and it's really calling back to a point Ciara made like 2 answers ago, when we started this process off like properly around this time last year, where we said, okay, we're actually going to go and focus 100% on this. It's not a side project anymore. In my head, a lot of the big goals that I had set were like, we'll get onto new frontiers and get the first funding. Well, like it was orientated sometimes or a little bit around investment milestones and this sort of flashy ego stuff. But the point that Ciara made was really, really good. It was that like getting accepted onto one of those programs does not validate your value proposition in the same way that not getting onto it doesn't invalidate it. Like those programs don't mean anything from that perspective. Every single one that we've gotten onto, we've learned really quickly that what we used to get on was actually completely wrong. Like we've just been wrong over and over again, and it's helped us to get like more along the way. But God, we were so wrong every time we did that. And like you can give yourself a pat on the back for getting onto it, but you should never use that as validation for what you're pitching. So yeah, I definitely start with like really strong customer discovery research. Just the biggest piece of advice I would say is just buy the book, The Mom Test. It's been our absolute Bible for what we've done. Buy it and read it, and then just put your idea on a shelf, figure out who do you think you'd sell that to and what problem they might have, and go out and spend those 60 hours talking to those people and really figure out, is it a problem that they're already allocating money or time towards? Because if it's not, it's just going to be so hard to sell something to them otherwise. And then when you do have that, again, exactly like Wendy said, don't start off with like this giant, big, flashy product, because you're just never really going to be able to build all of that from the get-go. The best way to do it is start with your wireframe prototype, put that in front of people, figure out what the core features on that they need, the like hygiene features is what we've always called them, and then just build those. And you should be so embarrassed of what you build. It's something I would never have said at the time to my co-founder, but God, what we launched with initially embarrassed me so much. But that's just the way you kind of have to do it. And everything that's like really good that you like now that you look to as inspiration probably started off really embarrassing as well.
Yeah, but I think it's all about, you know, focusing more on the problem than the solution, because for any problem there's a number of different solutions, and that'll evolve as you learn more and as you pivot more. And if this is too expensive, you move to that. But if you're really set on that kind of problem, those things will unearth themselves as you discover more.
Yeah.
Ciara, what recommendations do you have for our group?
I read a quote in a book a few years ago, and it was that if you believe in your gut that your idea or your product will enhance people's lives, then don't give up. And, you know, it's a very hard thing to measure, but imagine if you did give up and someone did it in 5 years, how would you feel? Because that's one of the reasons that I was like, no, I know I'm ahead of the curve. I know the technology's not there. I know the networks aren't there. I know the screen tech's not there. But if Rupert Murdoch launches a VR 360 content agency in 5 years, I will go insane. So that was kind of there. And you can do really simple stuff, like when you're trying to validate your idea, watch what people do. If you're on a bus or you're in a queue, and if you're looking at consumer behavior, watch what they do, like watch the small things. Like I knew a guy who had a newsagent in Fairview, and he was trying to figure out whether or not he would open one up in Finglas, and he basically went to the site in Finglas and counted the amount of people who walked past. So like, look, I used to look at people on their phones the whole time, and I used to look at like what size phones they have, you know, what demographic were they, how long do they look them for. This is before any statistics came out. You know, you need to observe your ideal customer's behavior and track it and be realistic. And don't ask everyone in your family, do they think you're amazing? Because they'll say yes, right? Ask, I don't know, your mother-in-law, or ask the neighbor with the barking dog, you know. Step outside your comfort zone. But all the time, like all that time, you have to build the knowledge of the problem, because if you're just a vitamin and not a painkiller, your sales cycle is going to be so much longer, and it's literally just going to be painful. So, you know, whatever that problem is, if you feel that in your gut and you can't let it go, then don't let it go.
It's so true. And I think, Ciara, you're exactly that mom test book that Daniel mentioned. It's really like, it echoes what you're saying there. It's, you know, if you ask your mom, does she like your product? She's going to say yes, because she's your mom. You know, you have to kind of ask good questions to get good answers, and really kind of step outside yourself to get those. Brilliant. Last question, and then we might open it up to the floor. I think it's really interesting. First of all, it has to be said that it's lovely to have so many female entrepreneurs on this talk today, because as Ciara reminded me, it's National Female Entrepreneurship Day. So pick up the women in the entrepreneurial space, absolutely. And then the second thing that I find really interesting is you're all co-founders. So that's quite an interesting dynamic for, you know, an entrepreneurial team. Some people go it alone, some people have a larger group, but you're all co-founders. Can you share with me just a little bit of what that experience is like? Maybe we'll go to Wendy.
My co-founder is actually my sister.
Oh, wow.
So we actually had a business before this for 11 years together. So we've worked together now for 15 years. We're complete opposites. And it works really, really well, because I don't like doing what she does. She doesn't like doing what I do. So there's no, you know, it's like, I'm going to do it this way, and I'm like, get grand, go ahead, because, you know, we're very opposites. But we also, you know, in our last business, you know, we had some ups and downs, and, you know, at the end of the day, like, it's all about, there's no time or place in our office or for arguing about, there's no place for it. Like, if there's something different, or, you know, we play it out properly, like, play it out. You go, well, why do you think this will work better, and why do I think it'll work better, and back it up with something. And the thing about it is, sometimes we'll go, but we'll try it this way for a few weeks, or we'll test it on half of the, you know, the users, and we'll test this on the other half of the users, and it becomes a test, right? So it's never like my way or the highway. It's always about what's the best for the users, like, and how do we test our ideas. Yeah. So, and she is my sister, and we don't have, I know some people go, oh, I won't be able to work family, but we don't have that. We're very much about having each other's back. And I suppose we have the same goal of where we want to go with the business. And yeah, as I said, we are opposites, as in we have different skill sets. So I can't imagine working with someone that's like me.
But I think that's amazing. I mean, it's a naturally built-in sounding board for each of you in the same team, you know, and I think that that's so good for checking your assumptions and kind of checking the sense of what you're doing. If you that back and forth.
Yeah, if you actually though really want to scale and have a global business, you'll find it very hard to get investors to invest in a single founder. Unless that single founder has real domain knowledge and they're an expert, you know, unless they've real, you'll find as you go along, the investors are looking for backup, right? They're looking for, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, that the business isn't going to be affected. technically too much, you know, and that's what they're looking for when they're giving you their money. So, you know, a founding team is I think important.
Strength in numbers, absolutely. Ciara, how have you found the co-foundership?
So myself and my co-founder have worked together in various organizations, making lots of money for various people since 1999. So we've been through the ups and downs and the ins and outs, both as colleagues, as supplier, customer, distributor, in that whole network. And really, like, it's funny because I was referred to as his work wife, you know, and like, because we've been through so much together, neither of us has an agenda. So it's a bit like Wendy says. So both of us are better at different things. So if I say, listen, I really feel that we should target this customer in this way, then that's fine. But equally, if he says, listen, I think we should tweak the projections of the forecast by X%, then I say that's fine. Like, I might as well look at a bowl of porridge as look at an Excel spreadsheet. So, you know, it's it's a balance, and it's also about being able to voice your opinion. And sometimes, you know, there's ways and means of doing that, but you get over it. Like, it's not about egos, it's not about titles, it's about the business and the next 5 years. But it is great to have someone there that, you know, like, say if I do a pitch and the pitch doesn't go very well, and he'll say, right, I want you to tell me word for word what happened, and just tell them the words, and they can reciprocate back to you maybe what you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it. So, like, for me, I couldn't imagine doing it on my own. And if I did do it on my own, I would say that the pressure would be immense.
Yeah, it is again, a sounding board, a comfort, a resource, but also, as you say, a level of expertise. You know, when I teach entrepreneurship, I often say to students, you know, there is no such thing as the perfect entrepreneur, because there's no entrepreneur who is a marketing guru and a financial analyst and a legal expert and someone with management experience. You know, there's no one person can't have all of those things at the one time. But if you spec it out and you get a team and you develop yourself and they develop yourself, you're catching up on that kind of perfect model. Daniel, what has your experience been of co-founding?
Yeah, the first startup I tried to do a good few years ago, I tried to do it on my own for about 2 years, and I just don't know how people do it. I don't know how they do it at all. Like, it's so much better having someone along with you on the journey. And it's some of the stuff that we've said, it's like someone to pick you up, or to like call, like drop that message in Slack when you're thinking of snoozing that alarm for another few hours. Like, there's an element of the accountability and the partnership, and you're working on it together. I also think there's so much more to it than that as well. I think from like an investor and a customer perspective, they see that like you and a co-founder started this a year ago or 5 years ago. There's so much they already know about you as people. Like, they know that you can compromise, you can work together as someone, you can find common ground on different values. Like, there's so much like that goes on behind the scenes that you might not think of initially, but I think that's all pretty visible to the people who've seen this happen over and over again. So I think that's really important as well. With myself and Dara, similarly to Wendy, there's parts where we're really similar and parts where we're so different. And I think there's some of the parts where we're really similar have worked out really well. So we both realized pretty early on that we share this common value of like strong opinions loosely held. So we always come into things with an opinion on what it should be, but we're always willing to be swayed by the other person. Things like that are an important aspect of a co-founding team, because a lot of the time you're wrong and you need someone to point it out. So I think that's important. In the ways that we're different, like, we're so different in some ways. So like, I'll read an article or I'll see a talk and I just get completely filled with ideas for like what we should do and what the next few years will look like and everything. And then I'll bring it to Dara and he'll just like pull me back down to reality. And together we'll end up finding this middle ground where we create something that's ambitious, but also realistic and all those different things. So there's parts to the co-founder relationship like that are really great as well. Yeah, I think that's probably a good overview of the way that we work.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant. Although I have a sneaking suspicion, Daniel, that your first startup was a farm.
Oh, That's also true. And we actually were co-founders on that for Clonford Pet Farm. Myself and a friend started when we were 11, and that was a great co-founding relationship. We also worked pretty well together. So I had a little bit of experience in it.
At 11. Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. We're going to open the floor. There's a couple of questions that have come in that I might draw your attention to. Hopefully we can see them, but I'll call them out. So an anonymous attendee says, great to hear how much help that each of the speakers received from different programs like New Frontiers. What stage were they at when they went to those? Was it just an idea, or had they the first versions of their products built? Daniel, where were you at? What stage were you at when you joined the New Frontiers program?
So New Frontiers, we had focused a lot on two main areas. When I actually applied for New Frontiers, it's worth mentioning, I was actually a solo founder at the time. So I hadn't started working. I don't think I'd even really met Dara yet, my co-founder. But there's two key things that I'd been working on a lot. One was customer discovery and validation. I came in with like a wall of 50 logos of different government departments in different countries, local and national level, all these people we talked to that kind of proved that there was a core problem here that they were trying to address and they pay for. That was one. The second was that that prototype wireframe that Wendy mentioned. We came in with screens showing what our vision for what this would look like would be, like a starting and like a future point as well. So for New Frontiers, those were the two really core things that got our foot in the door. For NDRC and for Enterprise Ireland with their competitive start fund, the goalposts were completely different. So what they were really keen to see, especially, so they actually were interested in different things. For Enterprise Ireland with the CSF fund that they have, it was all about proof of initial traction. So that was like, have you shown that someone's going to pay for this? For us anyway, that was like the big goal post that we had to hit. So it's definitely a little bit further down the line. With NDRC, they had like 10 times more of a focus on customer discovery than and New Frontiers had. Like they really, really wanted to see that we had a very deep understanding of customer pain points, of who had it. So yeah, it's possibly not the things that you might expect, but it's sometimes some of the like softer work that you're doing around the edges.
Okay, so it kind of varies. Ciara, did you find that in some of the programs that you were in that they were looking for you to be at different stages?
Well, I applied to New Frontiers 5 times before I got it. And at each time I was at a different stage of progress. And I have 2 little girls, and what I say to them is like, be so good they can't ignore you. And effectively that's what I did. So when I initially started, I did phase 1 of New Frontiers, which I would recommend actually, because it's at night time or it's a weekend, and it's a really good grounding in terms of the reality of what you're trying to achieve and your idea. And then I started the relationship process of trying to get through. At that point, I didn't have customers, but then I kind of slowly but surely gained customers. I did a lot of market research. So by the time I actually did the program, I had quite a bit of revenue behind me. So, but remember, so that was over a 2.5-year period. So, you know, just because your project is only at a particular stage, don't assume that you are not applicable for the program. So, you know, and I think even remember that the people who are reading your applications, they have their own understanding of what they think it is. They have their own subject knowledge, and they might not be an expert in your particular area. So each one does want different things. We did get New Frontiers, but we had customers. We had an MVP, second iteration of our MVP, and we had paid pilots at the time. And at the same time, I applied for CSF. But the person who was reading the application form I didn't make my value proposition clear enough for the person reading it. Okay. So CSF wants you to kind of be at a different level. And it used to be that you couldn't have revenue over 50,000 euros, but now that's gone to 100,000 euros. So that says to me that in an ideal world, if you want to understand the CSF model, then you really do need to have a level of traction behind you, because otherwise they would have increased it from 50 to 100.
Yeah, so they're kind of looking for maybe that scale up rather than the kind of the startup stage.
Yeah, so, you know, and it's a good reality check. Like, and the thing I would say is the programs do have different expectations. I only spoke to NDRC once, and I got the feeling that it was they viewed my project as very content orientated, and that wasn't what they were interested in. But I think every time you apply or have a chat with someone or meet with a mentor about these programs, it's a great way to get feedback on where you are in the real world.
Yeah.
So it's worth doing, just to extract the information.
Yeah.
And to make yourself better.
And it's harping back to Wendy's advice of, just do it, just get out there. I think entrepreneurs are a group like all of us, that suffer from a bit of imposter syndrome at different stages of their evolution. And they think, I'll wait until this is a little bit further on before I reach out and ask for some support. But there's always someone to ask, and even the LEOs provide mentorship, and they can recommend which programs you move towards. They can, funnel you towards maybe an Enterprise Ireland HBSU kind of thing. So there's always a place to start, and maybe it's not a large 6-month program. Maybe you start off with a hackathon, or you start off with an accelerator over a week or a couple of days of a food academy, and move from there. I think that's the kind of the mentality to have, that at any stage there's someone to ask. And Wendy, can I ask you, just that platform that you talked about where you can get mentorship from across the world, can you remind us what that's called again?
Yeah, it's just called Lunch Club.
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah, it's so good, because you put your own profile up, and you literally pick any subject. Like, I know the girl that does, on our team that does marketing, she's like product market fit, and she got to speak to the guy that designed Alexa, that kind of way. So you just randomly put place to people from all over the world, and you just talk to each other about their businesses and what they're doing.
Entrepreneurship roulette, isn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, and then last question, and I'm going to put it to Wendy, and then we'll bring this to a close. We have a comment in: great talk all for each of you. We'll go to Wendy. Have you ever had a moment with your respective businesses thinking that it wasn't going to work, that you almost gave up, and how did you overcome that?
Oh, I think you have that moment very often. I think that's a weekly thought, and if you don't have it, there's something wrong. You're constantly running out of money as a startup. You constantly have a runway for so long. You're constantly going, how, where's next, how we get this, and people are like, oh, it's only 6 weeks of Christmas. I'm thinking of our runway. I'm not thinking of Christmas. I'm going, oh, slow down. But yes, that's as part of the journey. If you're not worrying about where you'll be this time next year financially as a startup, there's something wrong, unless you've $1 million client or something paid you. But how you get over things like that is you have to have a moment of yes, and then it's back to the network, right? It's back to your team, it's back to the people around you, it's back to the little wins. And I think that's the big thing for us. We celebrate the little wins, really celebrate the little wins. I remember when we were the first time without any marketing, that we got a download. Yeah. Wow. We were like, oh, somebody downloaded without us paying, and it snowballs, and now they're celebrating, they're just excited for the downloads and the reviews. And we used to do weekly figures, and now Aoife comes in and she's sending the figures to us every morning because she's just excited to share the figures. Yeah. So we celebrate that, but at the same time, everything's you're getting the reviews, you get the downloads, you're getting everything. All your money's going out as a startup. Well, you have some coming in, but it never really matches at the beginning, so you're constantly, so we're trying to raise €1 million at the minute. So we have €1 million fundraising round open, and that is I'm sitting in my shed. Do you know what I mean? I'm in my garden shed, and in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm trying to get €1 million from people who have never met me, but they're on my computer. It's bonkers when you think of it like that. And I walk back into my family who are their world is going on, and I'm coming out of my world after being talking to someone in China and Japan and Germany and trying to raise money, and then I'm going in and it's like, what's for dinner? Like, that's me asking them now, not them asking me, because I don't cook. But do you know, that kind of way, it is a story in itself, like, right? But what the pandemic has done is to get in front of the investors you're getting in front of now. Before the pandemic, you would have had to really had your connections. You would have had to fly to that country. You would have had to pitch in a boardroom for 10 minutes and then take questions and answers and then leave and fly home. Now you can meet these people on your computer screen, in your shed, in Ireland, in a lockdown, that would never have met you 6 months ago through a screen, and invest in you. So I think the opportunities are massive out there. It's not doom and gloom. The investment world is definitely on the up. We haven't got the person to give us the €1 million yet, but I plan to get it because I've no choice. So yeah, so you do have those moments, but at the end of the day, you know, that's part of the journey.
But I mean, I think
makes the wins better.
Small wins are really important. I know Daniel is a real to-do lister, and he always breaks things down into small tasks and ticks them off. But I mean, big wins too. Women in Enterprise Award, Wendy, 2019. You know, I'm sure those things help as well. I'm going to close it off now. But I'm going to ask you, it's perhaps a personal question, but I just think it's important for you to take that moment for yourself. I'm going to ask you, are you proud of yourself? What do you think, Daniel?
It's a tricky question. I mean, I'm proud of the accomplishments we've made. There's so much I still want to accomplish with it. Yeah, we possibly don't take enough time to do the pats on the back sometimes. Yeah,
and you know, external validations is great, but it's important to take a minute. What about you, Ciara?
Yes, I am. And as a parent, I think a lot of you guys won't be at that point yet, but you know, and even when I meet younger female entrepreneurs, like, I am so driven to make the journey easier for the next person, so the next person can be proud and can pull everyone up another rung of the ladder. So to that degree, I don't feel fulfilled yet. I've a whole lot more way to go, and I have a lot of things to prove to a lot of people, including myself. But yes, at this moment in time, I am.
Good for you. Yeah, I mean, serious amount of resilience, changing your idea and not giving up, and I think it's amazing. What about you, Wendy?
Yeah, I think that's one thing entrepreneurs lack is well, especially, no offense, Daniel, but especially female entrepreneurs. There's a very much imposter syndrome goes around a lot. Yes, I'm proud of where we've got today, but I definitely haven't reached where I want to be. And I do know my family are proud of me. So, but yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the rest of the journey.
I think it's really important to give yourself that moment. And also, I mean, I have to say, from a personal perspective, I'm a teacher of entrepreneurship, and I'm hugely proud of you guys for flying the flag for entrepreneurship and female entrepreneurship. It's incredible to be able to give our students examples like yours in the classroom and not have to look to overseas examples. So, you know, I think from everybody watching here today, and all of those who might watch the recording, thanks very much for all you do. And the next time you have a shadow of doubt, maybe give yourself a pat on the back from us. So with that in mind, we're going to close it off. If there are any DCU students on the call, just to remind you that there is a startup clinic. Like we talked about, mentoring is so important. So if you have a startup idea and you are in DCU, contact Terence Bowden at dcu.ie. The email has been sent to you in your newsletters, and have a one-to-one chat about your startup idea and how we can support you. And for everybody else, I hope you engage with another Transform session in the weeks to come. But thanks very much. Take care.
Bye.
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 Everybody.